Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today for Backyard Composting. This event is hosted by Tarrant Regional Water District, the Bob Jones Nature Center, and the City of Southlake. Today we're going to be hearing from John Cheney, a Tarrant County Master Gardener, about backyard composting. If you have any questions throughout the whole presentation, you're welcome to type them into the question and answer box, and we'll get back to you with an answer. My name is Heather Bass, and I am a conservation specialist with Tarrant Regional Water District. And before we hear from our speaker about backyard composting, we're going to hear a little bit about Tarrant Regional Water District. Again, thank you for joining us.
Good morning. This is John Cheney. I'm a Master Gardener, Master Composter, Citizen Forester, and have an MS in Communications from San Jose State. Today's presentation will be on water conservation, recycling, composting, and mulching. The Tarrant County water supplies come from the Tarrant Regional Water District. It's our raw water supplier. The slide there demonstrates where we get our water. We serve the needs of about 2 million people across 11 counties. Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, and Trinity River Authority are our primary customers. 4 major reservoirs supply the water, like Bridgeport, Eagle Mountain, Cedar Creek Reservoir, and Richland Chambers Reservoir. About 80% of our water supplies come from East Texas. We would like to conserve water and urge everyone to use conservation in their use of water. The population will be growing from 2.1 million to 4.3 million individuals in Tarrant County. And the issue is conservation as a water supply strategy. It extends the life of existing supplies, meets the needs of a growing population, delays the need for expensive new supplies, and makes water more available during drought times. It reduces peak demand by conserving water, and it's the least expensive water supply strategy. TRWD is our residential water evaluation program, which is available free to individuals in Tarrant County. A licensed irrigation inspector evaluates your sprinkler system at no charge, and Tarrant County residents can use the program, and to reach it, you call 817-720-4368. Sign up at savetarrantwater.com. Statistics: a typical American uses 101 gallons of water per day. Europeans use 53 gallons. The average annual water use in a typical home is 127,400 gallons per year, 350 gallons per day. Letting your faucet run 5 minutes uses about as much electricity as a 60-watt light bulb does in 14 hours. So it's good to conserve water. TRWD service area, it services 11 counties and 2 million residents. These are our 4 reservoirs where water comes from. And benefits from TRWD conservation: it extends the life of existing supplies, slows the drain on reservoirs, reduces the peak demand in summertime, it delays the need for new reservoirs, which are very expensive, and twice-week watering has resulted in a decrease in annual demand in our area of 10%. Saving water. You can save water by fixing a leak in your faucet or toilet. You can adjust the float device in the tank to shut off 1 inch below the overflow valve. Replace older toilets, and newer ones use 15% less water. Take a shower instead of a bath. It saves water too. And you can use low flow shower heads. Turn off faucets when shaving and brushing your teeth. The City of Fort Worth offers the free irrigation audit at this phone number. You can report any wasted water if you see sprinklers running and spewing water. You can call the City of Fort Worth and they'd be happy to look into it. Or you can send it to waterconservation@fortworthtexas.gov. I saw my grandson one day, Merritt, he comes to help with composting. He was chewing on something and I asked him, what was it? He says, it's a slug. I said, spit it out right now, son. After I got over the disgust of the slug, I said, well, Merritt, what did it taste like? And he said, worms. History of composting. 10,000 years ago, Ahmed Ali Hussein, I just made that name up, by the way, broke up soil and plowed in household waste near his home. And this was the first compost made that we're aware of. In 69 BC to 30 BC, composting became mainstream. George Washington even used compost on his farm. Justus von Liebig wrote about organic chemistry and application of ag and philosophy. He also read about chemical farming. In other history notes, George Washington Carver did research to help poor farmers. He suggested the use of compost, and he wrote a number of books. Anne France Harr wrote about the scientific basis for composting. And J.I. Rodell promoted organic gardening and sustainable agriculture, and quite a few organic gardeners follow his advice in his books. Today, Disney World, Florida has one of the largest static compost piles under 4 acres, and it's undercover. Continuing with compost history, compost is a soil amendment. And when we use the word amendment, what we mean is anything you add to your soil is called an amendment. Compost adds structure to sandy soil, helps to keep it from draining so quickly. Compost loosens clay soils and helps it to present water to your plants in a slower manner. Compost helps with rainwater retention. It can help retard erosion, and compost reduces the need to water. Compost product is controlled release of fertilizer. Compost is aerobic, which is with oxygen. Compost is a natural decomposition. Organic is anything that was alive, and when we add soil to the material, it's called the amendment. A compost-ready product is compost when you can no longer identify the original materials. Green is nitrogen, and brown is carbon. Green often thought of as the grass you add to your compost pile, and brown usually being made up of leaves. North Texas has mostly 2 kinds of soil, sandy and clay. Landfills cost about $1 million per acre, the size of an American football field. So they're very expensive to build, and we can avoid that by composting and putting a lot of our things that we now throw away into the compost bin. 20% of landfills are wasted holding food scraps, and food scraps can go directly into your compost pile. The average landfill is 600 acres, so you can see how expensive it would be to build a new one. Landfill liners alone cost $45 billion. I asked my grandson what he wanted to be when he grows up, and he said, I want to be a party pooper. That's little Merritt. He's quite the composter. Compost trivia: the only wrong way to make compost is to send your stuff to the dump. And that was referred by J. Howard Garrett, the dirt doctor. He has some good books too they want to look at. Some people use continuous feed piles, which is they pile up their compost materials and they leave it for up to a year, and then it becomes compost. Most of us, however, tend to turn it and water it to get compost sooner. Compost rules of thumb. 2 to 3 parts brown are what we start with, and 1 part green. We use air, moisture, time, and volume to make compost. volume being a compost bin, a 3 by 3 by 3. This is a picture of the compost outpost at the Botanic Gardens in Fort Worth. And these folks are showing some of the vegetables that were grown with compost that was made out there. As a child, I had a medical condition that said I had to eat dirt 3 times a day to survive. I was lucky my older brother told me about it. He later died of massive headache. Why recycle? What can we recycle? We can recycle lots of things like paper, cardboard, yard trimmings, wood, food, other mixed things, plastic, metal. We don't want to put metal in our compost. We don't want to put glass in, but it can be recycled, both of these things. Recycle, that's the key here. 18% of our household organic waste could be handled through backyard composting. And why compost? It is the least expensive soil additive for your garden. In most cases, it's free material used to make it, and it's readily available. It lessens the need for new landfills. What are the 5 rules of ROS? They are mass, air, volume, moisture, and time. And we try to get a temperature of between 130 to 160 degrees. What uses are there for compost? It can be used on lawns instead of synthetic fertilizers, which will run off into the streams and rivers. It can be used as a top resin for lawns using 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch layer. And it can be used as a 1 to 2 inch mulch in flower beds. It can be used as a coarse mulch on trees and shrubs, and it can be mixed into your garden, and you can use it in potting soil in pots within the house. What are the benefits of composting? Slow release nitrogen is the source in compost. Contains a full spectrum of central plant nutrients. It balances the pH level of your soil between acidic and alkaline soil. It helps bind soil particles, holding air, moisture, and nutrients like a sponge. Compost benefits. It helps break up bound particles in clay soil, helps sandy soil to retain water and nutrients so it doesn't just drain off quickly. It alters texture and structure of all soils. Compost introduces and supports diverse life in the soil, bacteria and beneficial insects and worms. Beneficial microorganisms in compost suppress disease and harmful pests. Compost increases the soil's ability to retain water and decreases runoff. There's a slower way to compost. You can add to your pile as you go, and it's a cool and easy way to make compost. It may take 3 to 8 months if you don't turn your compost pile, and 12 months if you just pile it in one big pile and leave it there for up to a year. A pile is made over a period of weeks and months sometimes. You can build material as it becomes available, or you can build your whole pile all at once. You can use an activator to increase the heat buildup. An activator being bone meal, cottonseed, or alfalfa meal. A few quick tips for you are alternate addition of greens and browns. You want to alternate them when possible. You want to cover food scraps with a brown layer or activator. If you cover your food scraps, you will not get animals in your compost pile. You want to turn your pile now and again and add finished compost from the bottom to the top layer, and it will produce your compost quicker. Keep some activator on hand to use as well. The batch pile, or hot and fast method, is created in 1 to 3 months. You can make a quick pile of compost. We want to try to retain 130 to 160 degrees in the first 2 weeks of composting. And you can do that. You can turn your pile every 7 to 10 days. You move your outer layer to the center where temperature is the hottest. Weekly, you want to check and take the temperature and add water if needed to maintain the wet consistency of a sponge. You don't need the water to flow from it. Tips to create a pile. Place a layer of coarse chopped material on the bottom, such as branches, because it allows air to get into your pile and aerate it. You want to use a 6 to 8 inch layer of moist green, a 6 to 8 inch layer of drier brown material, and a 1 inch layer of manure if you'd like, and you can repeat until the bin is full, ending with a brown layer on top. Keep the pile consistency to that of a wrung-out sponge as far as the water goes. We build compost piles through layering. We use brown and green material or layers. What is an activator? An activator is used to help heat up your pile, and usually it's in a powdered form like blood meal, bone meal, cottonseed, corn gluten, or alfalfa meal. Coffee grounds can be added to your pile as well as an activator. And many coffee shops give them away free for you to use in compost. Some are enzyme activated and work like a yeast when mixed with water. How to apply your activators? Powdered meals and coffee grounds you just dust in 3 or 4 times per batch. Each layer you put in a little bit. Dust on food scraps for an add-as-you-go pile. Fresh manure you would use with your green layers, adding 3 to 4 layers of manure per pile. It smells and is slow to decline. That's your fresh manure. So some people prefer not to use it because of the smell. Dry manure, you would dust it in between the layers 3 to 4 times as you build your pile, and you dust it on top of the scraps. Enzyme acting, the commercial products that you use for an activator, you mix with approximately 1 quart water and sprinkle on the pile as you are layering. Now, what do you want to not use in your compost pile? There's a lot of things you don't want to put in it. Mainly dairy products, meat, grease, and bones you don't want to put in there because you'll attract animals if you put those things into your pile. And they don't deteriorate very well. You don't want to put in contaminated material, poisonous leaves such as castor bean, oleander. You don't want to put in other kinds of poisonous leaves. Bermuda grass, Johnson grass, crabgrasses, no weeds such as morning glory, buttercups, oxtails. No weeds do we want to put in that have gone to seed. Never use insect infested or diseased leaves such as you might get from a rosette rose that you're tearing out of your yard. You don't want to use dog or cat waste in your pile. It's not good. Wood ashes and barbecue ashes or coal ashes, because they are very slow to deteriorate. You can sprinkle a little on if you choose, but you don't want to use too much because it will retard the development of your pile. Weeds are subjective. Some people like to add their weeds they pull from the yard in their pile, but I prefer not to myself. We have some pictures of people again at the compost outpost at the Botanic Garden, and they're shoveling into a bin here. What can I use to compost? These volunteers in this picture are making compost tea, which is then sold to people at one of the plant sales. And you can use most anything you get from your yard, green or brown, to make compost. You can use food scraps. Of course, you want to pull back some of your pile, put the food scraps in, and then recover it, and that keeps the animals from approaching your pile. Eggshells, seeds, these are things you want to break up when you put in your pile. And your vegetables too, you might want to chop them up because they deteriorate quicker when you chop up your vegetables that you put in your compost pile. Leaves, fresh green leaves provide nitrogen. Dried brown leaves provide carbon. Fresh grass provides nitrogen as well. Fresh weeds, the pile needs to heat to 140 to kill the weed seed. So if you're not going to get a hot pile, you don't want to use the weeds. Manure you can use from just about any animal, except we don't want to use household pets, dog or cat manure, but you can use horse, rabbit, donkey, and cow manure. And coffee grounds are very good. And coffee grounds are neat because you get them for free from the various coffee shops, and they help to make your compost a very nice dark black color. In browns, they're high carbon to nitrogen ratio. Usually we use the dead leaves, and now in dead leaves, you don't have access to them in the summer. So what a lot of people do is they package up their leaves, leave them in a plastic bag, and then they use them during the summer when they don't have leaves available. Dry hay works as well. It's a slower decline than other things you put in your pile. Dry wood, wood chips, and sawdust are a slower decline as well. So if you want to get your compost in a month or two, you don't want to use too much of these products. And paper, you can chop up cardboard and it works well as a brown. Now greens, low carbon to nitrogen ratio, grass clippings, fruit and vegetable scraps, and dried manure. The tips here are green material lessens the need for your use of activators. Some people don't use activators at all in their pile. Sawdust and ashes have a very high carbon to nitrogen content, 500 to 1, and you want to use them sparingly. Wood materials take a long time to break down, having a carbon to nitrogen ratio of 700 to 1. Chip or shred and use for a different purpose, such as pathways. That's a good way to use your wood material. Now, if you want to get very scientific about how to make compost, the ideal ratio is 30 to 1. And this slide shows some of the ratios of the materials. Leaves, which are most commonly used, are 40 to 1, and grass clippings are 17 to 1 for nitrogen. Chemical composition, how to calculate to get the 30 to 1. This is an example. If you use 1 measure of brown leaves, it's 60 to 1. You add a little food scrap to it, it's 15 to 1. And if you use grass clippings, it's 17 to 1. Now you add that up together, you get 92 divided by 3, you get a good ratio of 30 to 1. Now this is not scientific, so you don't have to be exact, but this shows you the way to calculate 30 to 1. You don't have to do this. You can just use the grass and the leaves and the vegetables, and you don't have to do all the calculating to figure out how to get to 130 to 160 degrees. It'll get there naturally if you put these in a layered manner. Troubleshooting your pile. If it's too wet, you need to turn the pile and add carbon. You may get maggots if it's too wet, and they're nasty looking little creatures. So again, to alleviate that, you would turn the pile or add carbon to it. Now, if it's too dry, you moisten it, again, to the consistency of a moist sponge. You don't want water running off of your pile. You want it to be moist, but not decomposing. Too much carbon and not enough nitrogen. If that happens, you turn your pile, adding nitrogen material, and you can use an activator. Did you know that 1 acre of soil contains as much as 133 pounds of protozoa? That's a single cell animal. It contains 900 pounds each of algae, earthworms, and arthropods, and 2,400 pounds of fungi and 2,000 pounds of bacteria. All of that is in 1 acre of soil. Okay, now more troubleshooting. Ammonia smell, if you get an ammonia smell, you have too much nitrogen or it is too alkaline. And to alleviate that, you turn and add carbon to your pile. If it's too alkaline, you turn and add acid. And acid consists of oak leaves, sawdust, and vegetable scraps. Now, if it smells bad, if it's got a putrid smell, it's probably too wet. And in order to fix that, you turn it to aerated, and you can add dry carbon, a brown material, to absorb the excess moisture. For pests, such as raccoons, fruit flies, ants, rats, you only get those when you use meats or dairy, or you put your vegetables on top of your pile and invite them in to eat them. Again, you want to slide back some of your pile, put your vegetables in, and cover it up. And then you won't have these pesky little animals in your pile. Okay, now this is a barrel. This is an example of a turning barrel. It rotates and mixes, aerates your compost. Now, if you use one of these, the biggest mistake most people make is they don't throw in a couple of shovelfuls of soil when they put their carbon and nitrogen into the barrel. And why would you add a couple of shovelfuls of soil? It brings all the worms and different bugs into the compost bin that you need to make compost, and it helps to decompose the material. Two other types of bins that are used are the static bins, like this plastic one on the left of the side, or the big plastic one on the right. And it's got an opening. You can open it at the top to add food scraps, more material, or to water your bin. Composting basics. Again, we shoot for the magic temperature of 130 degrees. We want to get it this high to kill the weeds and germs that cause diseases in your pile. And you do that by getting up to a 3-foot level when you start. And as your pile decomposes, it will shrink in size. You can help your pile stay hot by putting it in a bin and covering it with a tarp or a wood cover. A compost thermometer can be used to monitor your temperature in your pile. And if you go to one of the compost certification classes, you'll get a thermometer. Or you can buy them at one of the feed stores or stores like Home Depot and others. Again, 130 to 160 degrees is what we shoot for, and it kills the weeds, destroys bad pathogens, and it buffers with pH in your compost. This is the Fort Worth Botanic Gardens vegetable garden, and this is some of the compost being used to make these beautiful vegetables you see here. Look how big they get using compost. Again, here's another picture of some of the beautiful things that are made with the compost. This was in 2019 at the Fort Worth Botanic Gardens. Okay, the next slide shows making compost tea. And you don't want to drink compost tea. We put that on the label. Do not drink. Compost tea is used as a liquid fertilizer. A lot of people use it on their potted plants, and you can use it in your garden or on your flowers. You want to use your compost tea within 2 weeks when you buy it. You don't want to let it sit around because it deteriorates. Okay. Fertilizers. Organic would be compost, and synthetic would be store-bought. On the organic side, it's slow-release fertilizer. It's very stable. It feeds the soil, and it's free. That's the best part. Now, the synthetic, you purchase it at your favorite store. It's fast-acting. It's water-soluble. It's a precise formulation, but it costs you money, and it pollutes as when it runs off your yard into your streams, it pollutes the streams. Okay, troubleshooting again. If you have a bad odor, it usually means your compost is too wet. That means your compost is not breaking down if it's too wet or if it's too dry. So you need to be in that happy medium with a moist sponge type wetness. The fix to wet compost is to add brown and turn the pile, and the fix to a dry pile is to add water or more green. Good mulch. Compost makes a good mulch as a top dressing, and compost helps the soil absorb and retain moisture, and compost helps protect plants from disease and pests. And some people put compost on their grass over their whole yard to use it as a fertilizer. In summary here, today we discussed the water conservation issues, recycling, composting, and mulching. Texas AgriLife Extension Service at 200 Taylor Street in Fort Worth has a Master Gardener desk, and you can call in to this number with your questions regarding your yard and composting and other subjects related that the Texas AgriLife Master Gardeners can help you with. It's staffed by volunteer Master Gardeners and for your questions and answers on plants, landscaping, and gardening. Now there's question often comes up, how do I become a master composter? And to become a master composter in our area, there's two places you can get certified. One is the City of Fort Worth at the Parks and Recreation Department. A couple times a year, it has 2 evenings and a Saturday, costs about $60. And if you want to be certified, you get to do some volunteer time, around 20 hours per year. And currently it's taught by Larry Wilhelm. The City of Arlington has a program as well, and theirs is 1 evening and a Saturday, costs $40, and is taught by Master Gardeners. Each of those certifications comes with some little free walk-away gifts. You learn something new from every compost presentation you go to, and we hope that you will go to as many as you can and learn more about composting. Thank you.
We're at the Texas AgriLife demonstration garden called Compost Outpost 2 here. Is the Compost Outpost part of the demonstration garden. These are the elements of composting. You want to have your mass, your brown and your green, your moisture, your air, and time. Now we'll go inside and take a look at some of the bins. Typical compost bins, 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot, and this is where the compost material goes, and then it's turned. We move this bin's compost into this bin to turn it. And then over here's another kind of compost bin. These are metal. These are typical metal bins called shepherd's bins, and they are 3 by 3 by 3 as well. And you build your compost at the 3 foot height, and it shrinks as it completes itself. This is what a typical compost looks like when it's finished. It will not smell, and it's perfect for fertilizing your plants. I'm John Cheney. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to the Master Gardeners for sharing their knowledge with us. Again, if you would like to see any of those resources that were talked about earlier, or see some events in the future that are like this one, you can go to SaveTarrantWater.com. You can also go to SaveTarrantWater.com to sign up for our newsletter that comes monthly, and we'll give you information about water conservation in this area, low water use landscaping, native plants, things like that. And I'll also talk about the events that are coming up. And then also, if you have any questions, like I said, you can enter them in the text box now, or you're welcome to email us at conservation@trwd.com. Thank you so much for joining us.